Welcome, everybody. My name is George Handley. I'm temporarily subbing for our council chair, Dave Sewell, who is on his way. Welcome to our Provo Municipal Council meeting. It is Tuesday, April 20th, 2021. This meeting will be conducted as a hybrid meeting with some in-person components as well as continued virtual meeting access. The meeting will be available to the public for live broadcast and on-demand viewing on YouTube and Facebook at youtube.com/Provo City Council and facebook.com/Provo Council. The council requests that attendees help maintain the decorum of the meeting by silencing electronic devices and being respectful to others, and to wait to speak until called upon by the council chair. In the current situation where the meeting is also being held via Zoom webinar and broadcast over YouTube, I remind you to turn off your mics when not speaking so as to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast for all to hear. I will state the names then of those who are present here. I'm joined by fellow councilors Shannon Ellsworth, Dave Harding, Vice Chair Dave Shipley, and Travis Hoban. It looks like we're still waiting on Mr. Fillmore, and we're also joined by Mayor Michelle Cavusi, CAO Wayne Parker, and Brian Jones, our city attorney, and Cliff Strachan, our executive director of the council. Other staff and are assisting us with this meeting and also present for other purposes. So we welcome everybody, and we'll begin then with an opening prayer. I should mention, we expect Mr. Sewell to arrive and Mr. Fillmore as well very shortly. We'll begin with an opening prayer by Councilor David Shipley, after which we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance provided by, it was going to be Councilor Fillmore. Maybe if I could ask.
He's here.
He is here. I'm sorry. Oh, there he is. Hi, Bill. Sorry. I've got an extra large screen I'm looking at, so the images are a lot smaller. So Mr. Fillmore will give us the Pledge of Allegiance after the opening prayer. So go ahead, Mr. Shipley.
Our dear Father in heaven, we thank thee for an opportunity to meet. We thank thee for an opportunity for the economy and for government and for our city to begin to reopen, and for the blessings that have been realized through this process of shutdown and then reopening that we're in the midst of. We thank thee for thy hand in helping the medical community to assist us in this process. We thank thee for thy example of love and kindness in our life. Please help us to be loving and kind to those that we work with here within the city, and also that we interact with in our daily lives. We thank thee for all that thou hast blessed us with and the opportunities that we've been given. Please help us to be good servants and of the city and of the citizens, and please help and direct and guide us in ways that we can best serve and do the most good for the citizens of Provo. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Mr. Sewell's asked me to read a statement before we go to our next item on the agenda. As a council, we've had some discussion just as we ended the restrictions on masks for the city of Provo. In consideration of our current hybrid setup, we thought we'd offer some thoughts. These are thoughts that I drafted with Mr. Sewell's approval. The declining rates of coronavirus infection continue to be encouraging for Utah, and we want to express our gratitude for the commitment of so many for so long to maintain proper health protocols of masks and social distancing, and for the marvelous, even miraculous work that has led to the vaccines. We wish to take this opportunity to recognize the loss of life in our community and the sorrow of their loved ones. We also want to encourage everyone eligible to get their vaccine as soon as possible, and to thank the many professionals and volunteers who are working very hard every day to deliver the vaccines to the public. We recognize the wonderful efforts of our administration, especially early on in the pandemic, to make the health protocols a positive effort on the part of this community. And this progress that we've seen in the pandemic is what allows us now to be gathering again in person for our council meetings, even if it's still at a hybrid level, a day we have longed for as a council. And while we have missed in-person association, we have appreciated the considerable work of our staff to make our online experience possible and the patience of the public during this time. We are grateful that during this time we have continued to get valued feedback from citizens online and by email. We will continue to rely on our staff and on your patience as we transition to this hybrid model of our meetings, so as to facilitate the needs of several of our council members and many in the public who are still not vaccinated or who do not wish to risk coming to our meetings in person. As good as things seem at present, we do note that we are not quite out of the woods. We have not yet crossed the threshold where a majority of the population is vaccinated. Only a slight majority of our most vulnerable population of 65 plus is vaccinated in Utah. And there are concerning increases elsewhere in the country of variants that we hope don't arrive here as we race to get a majority of the population vaccinated. So as we host this and future meetings, and in the interest of our continued full recovery as a thriving and bustling community, we encourage compliance with the recommendations of the CDC and other health organizations to continue to practice social distancing and to wear masks when indoors and unable to socially distance, especially where vaccinated and unvaccinated people from mixed households are gathered. We ask then that we all guard the safety of the remaining majority of our population who are not yet vaccinated and who remain potentially vulnerable by using the protocols as recommended. And for clarification, because the CDC guidelines do not include a recommendation for masks in groups of vaccinated people, because everyone on the dais has been fully vaccinated, we will be socially distanced, but we will not be using masks while on the dais. But we encourage everyone to join us in using them as we mingle together in this hall and elsewhere when we do not know of everyone's vaccination level. So thank you very much. I'll turn the time now back to Mr. Sewell, who has joined us.
Thank you, Mr. Hanley. Appreciate you filling in during the start of the meeting, and really appreciate that thoughtful statement. I support it, and the whole council has reviewed it, and just wanted to express our thoughts on that. Next item of business is a presentation of the Mayor's Award of Honor by Mayor Cavusi.
First, this is from Mayor Cavusi, because my last installation, you were overflowing with all of this content. So, but I don't know if you're healthy, and I don't want to be what the media say. Well, it's a real honor and tribute. This is fine.
Sorry, thank you.
Thanks, Dave. So the word hero is so frequently thrown around these days, and too often for activities well beneath what the standard ought to be.
Let me define the characteristics of a hero while I introduce you to Mr. Ken Potts, Provo's true hometown hero. Eager to serve, whatever the personal cost, despite growing up through the Great Depression and not being able to graduate high school, Ken eagerly answered the call to serve his country at 18. A survivor and an eyewitness to history, Ken Potts is one of the just 2 survivors left from the USS Arizona and provides a patriot's voice from America's infamy at Pearl Harbor. A proud patriot, while you suffered loss and personal sacrifice, we can imagine your patriotism still burns bright. In the city that prides itself on hosting America's Freedom Festival, we are honored to have a resident so directly involved in preserving freedom for all of us. Humble for one so deserving of praise, Ken, and I know he'd prefer we call him that, no doubt feels we make too big a fuss. We are not, sir. If nothing else, thank you for giving us the opportunity to truly see the definition of a true hero. April 15th, Ken Potts turned 100 and graciously allowed his peace to be disturbed by the mayor, sharing its gratitude with honks and waves when they celebrated your birthday. While our gestures in no way compare to the debt America owes you, on behalf of Provo, I'd like to award you a true hero, which is the Mayor's Award of Honor. Honor has the logo on it, and it's from okay.
Sure.
You look great.
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to say, or?
No, I'm not one to give a speech. I've said mine right now.
Well, we're so honored and proud of you, and just want you to know how much we love you, and we're so thrilled to read about you.
Thank you, Mayor, for that presentation, and thank you, Mr. Potts, for your service to our country. We are now ready to receive public comment, and staff will play a short video explaining how interested persons can comment. Sure. Thank you. We're working on the audio for this. Just a moment, please.
John, can you try resharing that with the audio?
Yeah.
The council will allow it. There are 3 types of items for which public comment will be received. The first is the open public comment period. The council will allow up to 15 minutes for public comments on matters that do not appear on tonight's agenda. The second is for items that require a public hearing. For these items, time will be provided for all those who wish to speak. The third is for
Wrong screen.
Try again.
There are three types of items for which public comment will be received. The first is the open public comment period. The council will allow up to 15 minutes for public comments on matters that do not appear on tonight's agenda. The second is for items that require a public hearing. For these items, time will be provided for all those who wish to speak. The third is for items on the agenda that do not require a public hearing. The council will allow up to 15 minutes for comments on each item. Because the City Council is meeting virtually using Zoom webinar, and this meeting is being broadcast on the Provo City Council's YouTube channel, we have enabled telephone access to receive public comment, the numbers for which will be shown on screen during the meeting. When a caller is connected, they will be required to enter the meeting ID and enter the pound sign. When asked for a personal ID number, enter pound. The caller will now enter the meeting as an attendee and will be able to hear the meeting while muted. Similarly, we have enabled access for persons wanting to connect via computer to the Zoom meeting. As attendees, you can raise your hand electronically at the appropriate times to comment when called upon. For telephone callers, when you wish to speak on an item being discussed, press star 9 to raise your hand and then wait to be called upon. When called upon, press star 6 to unmute yourself. Attendees will be called upon by the last 4 digits of the listed phone number or by the name listed. Please provide your name and city of residence before making your comments. You will be given up to 2 minutes to speak. A timer will be posted on screen, and a beep should be audible when your time is up. A reminder that there is a lag of approximately 30 to 60 seconds between the meeting and the broadcast. To avoid confusion, callers should mute the broadcast to hear the discussion in real time. The open public comment period starts now.
Counselors, were you seeing that video okay on Zoom? Okay.
There are three types of items.
All right, if you'll bear with.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, thanks. The Zoom meeting in the council room has crashed. They're rebooting. So we're going to start taking calls, online calls first. It doesn't appear to be anybody online waiting to speak to public comment.
I'm sorry, on the contrary, there's a phone listener, number 1318, that's there with his hand up, his or her hand up.
Oh, I see it now. Caller 1318, go ahead and mute yourself.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
My name is Bernie McGuire. I live in Provo at 1580 North, 300 West. Calling reference to the Carterville permit parking area. And I've lived at this address for 30 years with minimal problems with people parking on the street in front of my house. And the residents up the street have initiated this ordinance and have since moved. And right now I'm going to be required to pay $300 to $400 a year for my, let me explain a little bit more. I'm a quadriplegic. I've got 3 to 4 people living with me that help me out as assistants, and they need to park in front of my house. So it's going to cost me $300 to $400 a year to pay for these permits for them to park there. And I've had minimal problems over the 30 years that I've lived here. And just wondering, since the people that have moved, if it's really proper to continue on with this ordinance, if the people around this area really want it. It's not that big of a problem. I know it is up the street where these people live. There are about 3 or 4 houses where it is an issue, but down where I am on 300 West, it's not really that big of an issue. And I wonder if there's any way for at least my house to get an exemption or exception. And just wanted that put on the record if I could, please.
That item's scheduled to be heard later tonight, and that's when they'll be taking all the public comments and taking in the recommendations.
Okay, I thought I needed to do it now. Sorry about that. So I'll just comment later.
Yeah.
No, technically you've given his comment now.
Okay, so I'm good to go. Okay, thank you.
That is all the public comment we have. No one else has their hands up.
Do we know if they have the ability to at least hear what we're talking about in the chamber yet, or should we await?
We can hear you.
Karen, can you hear us down there?
We can hear you.
So should we proceed with the agenda until Mr. Chair Sewell has ability to talk again, or should we wait until he's back on?
Vice Chair Shipley, I've been communicating with Dave. I actually wanted to make a comment and figure that portion might be an opportune time to do that, if I may.
That's just fine. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I appreciated the statement that was read earlier regarding
Dave Shipley,
regarding kind of our
Yeah,
COVID
yes. Okay,
precautions. I did want to mention that I think at the time it was drafted, we had been seeing declining rates, but I did want to acknowledge that nationally, the rates have been increasing. At the state level, they have flattened and they're neither decreasing nor increasing at this moment. But for the past 10 days or so, at both the county and the city levels, our COVID rates have been increasing. The 7-day average has been increasing for the past 10 days or so. So I do think it is very important, to encourage people to follow the CDC guidelines and to take these precautions. If we can keep our community rates down, we don't even have to have those uncomfortable conversations. And so I appreciate that the statement. I think it's even more urgent than perhaps when it was first drafted.
So if I can interject, so I am running tech in the council chambers, and we've lost audio. So we were able to hear everything, but now no one can hear you except for me. So if we, Dave, since you're currently running the meeting, do you want to call a 5-minute break and I'll reboot this computer and hopefully that will fix the Zoom issues?
Yeah, so if there's no, yeah, we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute recess and then plan on, what are we at, 6:10? Approximately 6:12. We'll go ahead and reconvene. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
What is happening?
Okay, we would like to reconvene this meeting of the Municipal Council. Apologize for the technical difficulties. This is the first time we've tried this hybrid format. We were in the middle of public comment, so we will return to that. Councillor Harding, I don't know how much of your comments got through. We missed part of it here. Was there anything more that you wanted to say in your public comment? Okay.
Mr. Sewell,
Yes.
this is Cliff. We still have no audio from the council chamber. Not audio, visual. We
Okay.
still have no visual. I don't know if that's what the cause of that is, but I would like to say that last week the staff spent a considerable amount of time with IT and people from IT, and we had this thing working. And obviously, sometimes a good plan runs into trouble when you actually get into the battle. But we're not sure what the technical problems, why they're happening today and not last week, but we'll try and figure that out for the next meeting. So we do appreciate everybody's patience.
Okay, I see we have video back, so I believe we are completely back online here. And we would like to resume. I don't know where Councillor Harding is, but let's see. Do we have everyone else? Okay, Dave, or Councillor Harding, did you, we missed part of your comment in the chambers here. I don't know if you wanted to revisit that at all. What's your pleasure? Councillor Harding? Can
Sorry,
any of you hear me?
I can now. I just got it going.
Okay. Okay, so my question was, we missed part of your comment during the public comment period. I'm not sure how much of it was missed by the public. Was there anything you would like to repeat or finish up with that?
Sure, I'll just summarize by saying that I think the message there and the encouragement for everyone to follow the CDC guidelines are all the more urgent as we see that our numbers are starting to take back up again.
All right, thank you. So Karen, did we have any other attendees that might want to speak virtually?
I don't see any other hands up. If either of the two people that are on wish to speak now, go ahead. Raised hand. If not, I know at least one of them is probably for a future item.
Okay,
Doesn't appear that they wish to speak at this time.
thank you. Do we have any members of the public who are here in the chambers who would like to make a public comment about an item that's not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we will close public comment and move ahead to item number 2, which is a report of Item number 1 is a consent agenda item, an ordinance approving the Dominion Energy franchise agreement. And we have 2 sets of minutes to approve at the same time, March 2nd, 2021 council meeting and March 16th, 2021 council meeting. Does any council member wish to remove any of these items from the consent agenda? Let's see. Just one moment here. I'm having. Okay. So I do not see any hands up, which means we will call for a vote to approve all 3 of these items. Councillor Shipley.
Yes.
Counselor Ellsworth,
Yes.
Counselor Fillmore,
Yes.
Counselor Hoban,
Yes.
I don't know if you're calling my name, but I can no longer hear audio from the council chambers.
We lost audio from the council chambers.
All right. Thanks everybody for being patient. We're going to try to work through this. Give us a minute. All right, since we're going to have to reboot systems again, we're going to need another 10-minute break. We apologize and appreciate everybody's patience, but let's go ahead and reconvene at 6:25, and we'll see if we can't find a contingency for the next time. So 6:25, and we'll take a break, and we'll hopefully be back and up and going, ready to go this next time. Thanks.
who is with us. I see Counselor Shipley, Counselor Fillmore. Is everybody else back? George, are you connected upstairs?
Yes, I'm going to move rooms though, but that note, you don't need to wait on me.
Okay. Right. So we were, counselors, we apologize for all the technical difficulties here. We were in the middle of actually conducting a vote on the consent agenda. And just a reminder of, we were voting on the ordinance approving the Dominion Energy franchise agreement and the two sets of council minutes from March 2nd, 2021 and March 16th, 2021. So we lost the recording. We're going to have to go through the roll call vote on that again. Vice Chair Shipley?
Yes.
Councillor Ellsworth?
Yes.
Councillor Fillmore? Councillor Fillmore, are you connected? It shows him, if you're connected, we can't hear you. I'll go on and then come back. Councillor Hoban?
Yes.
Councillor Handley?
Yes.
Councillor Harding?
Yes.
I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes. And last call for Councillor Fillmore. Okay, so we have six votes in the affirmative with Councillor Fillmore temporarily excused due to technical difficulties. All right, let's move on to item number 2, which is a report of the Elected Officials Compensation Commission. If any members of the public would like to give a comment for this item, they're encouraged to call in or sign in now. And this item is to be presented by Peter Madsen, who is the chair of the Elected Officials Compensation Commission. Mr. Madsen, are you ready to present?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. My name is Peter Madsen. As you mentioned, I'm the chair of the Elected Officials Compensation Commission, which is made up of 7 residents of Provo City with some level of expertise in compensation matters. Under Provo City ordinance, the Elected Officials Compensation Committee is created once every 4 years in the same year that the mayoral election is held. It is tasked with recommending the annual compensation for the mayor and municipal council members for the following 4 years to the Provo City Municipal Council. In developing our recommendations, we evaluated compensation for city council members and full-time mayors from similarly sized Utah cities, which we defined as cities in Utah with more than 85,000 residents. We also considered the duties of the mayor and city council members of Provo relative to those of the other large Utah cities of greater than 85,000 residents. The commission members voted unanimously in favor of the following recommendations. First, with regard to compensation for the mayor, we recommend that the annual salary of the mayor be set at $130,000 per year, continuing for the following 4 years. We also recommend that existing benefits remain in effect. Second, with regard to compensation of city council members, we recommend that the annual salary for each municipal council member be set at $21,000 per year, beginning January 1st, 2022 for the following 4 years. We also recommend that existing benefits for city council members remain in effect with the following adjustments for expense accounts. First, an increase in the monthly communications allowance from $120 to $150 per month, an increase in the monthly allowance for expenses incurred within city limits from $100 to $125 a month, an increase in the additional monthly expense allowance given to the city council chair from $100 to $125 a month, and an increase in the additional monthly expense allowance given to the council vice chair from $75 to $85 a month. We submitted our written recommendations with a little bit more information about our methodology and details about our recommendations. And we respectfully submit these recommendations and thank the council for the opportunity to study elected officials' compensation in Provo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Madsen. Councilors, do you have any questions for Mr. Madsen? Mr. Strachan?
Mr. Madsen, was there a second letter covering the mayor? Or did I miss that?
It was contained in the same document, the same letter. The letter addressed council members first and then the mayor afterward.
Okay. Councilors, I put in the chat that the FY 2022 impact will be about $18,300 for the half year that's effective, and obviously it's about double that for a full year.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Madsen? Seeing none, we will thank you very much, Mr. Madsen, you and your the other committee members who worked on this with you, and appreciate your help with that. We'll now open this item for public comment, and go ahead, Karen. Okay, actually, I'll take that on. So we've only got a couple of people in the attendee list. If any of you would like to make a comment, either use the raise hand feature if you're connected by Zoom, which it looks like all of you are. So we'll wait just a moment to see if there's any raised hands. Okay, looks like we don't have any public comment on this item, so we'll bring it back to the council for any discussion. And Mr. Strachan, my understanding is that we have until the third Tuesday in June to make a decision on this. It is not on the agenda to vote on tonight, but we can discuss it. Any discussion among councilors? All right, seeing none, then we will look forward to bringing this back. Oh, Councilor Ellsworth.
It looks like Bill Fillmore has his hand up.
Oh, why am I not seeing that?
It was his physical hand.
Oh, his physical hand.
Yeah.
I can't see him on the screen. So, okay, go ahead, Mr. Fillmore.
Yeah, for some reason, Mr. Chair, my raise hand function is not working.
Uh-oh.
No, just as a point of information, I looked this over and I couldn't resist doing a little math. I don't think any of us ran for office to make money off it. Certainly not to get rich. But if I remember some of the people that urged me at the last minute to run told me it wouldn't take more than 10 hours a week at the most. And my experience is it's more like at least 15, sometimes 20. And just for fun, that boils down, if you work 15 hours a week at city council matters, you're getting paid $29 approximately per hour. If you work 20 hours a week, you're getting $22 per hour. Just FYI.
Interesting. Okay, Councilor Harding.
So if I am understanding Councilor Fillmore correctly, he's saying that we're overpaid?
Exactly. Exactly.
Any other comments for tonight? All right. Thank you. We'll now move on, and it just came to my attention a few minutes ago that earlier there had been an arrangement to move a couple of these items around. So the item on our agenda shown as number 5 will be the next item we consider, and then we'll go back after that to item number 3. So item number 5 is an ordinance amending the zone map classification. Approximately 54 acres of real property, generally located at 3450 West Center Street, from A110 to M1, R18 PD, and RA. If any members of the public would like to give a comment for this item, they are encouraged to call in or sign in now. And this item is to be presented by Brandon Larson.
All right, Brandon Larson, Development Services. You heard quite a bit about this last time, so I'll just kind of give you a quick reminder of what we're looking at here, and then just a brief update. So again, you've got approximately 55 acres of land. Could you go down to, I think it's slide, go to, I don't want to move around a bunch on you, so could we go to slide number 7? Maybe up one. Yeah, there we go. Sorry. Okay, so just to remind you, we've got 55-acre rezone proposal here. So it's a mix of residential and light industrial. You've got essentially a 70-plus acre residential development, conceptual residential development on the north of Center Street. Again, we're kind of towards the very west end of Center Street here, about 3700 West and Center. On the south side of Center Street, you've got 2 non-contiguous parcels. Both of those parcels are proposed to be in the M1 light industrial zone. And again, north is R18 PD with 2 RA zone lots. You've got 2 homes there, existing homes that that are proposed to be platted and be on acre lots. So so that's just a little update on that. And I guess as far as light industrial, 100,000 square feet of flex space is what the applicant's proposing. Total of 300,000 square feet of light industrial. I think staff believes that's the proximity of the airport is a helpful thing here. We believe that this light industrial, if this land were rezoned to light industrial, it would be supportive of the airport, and staff is also supportive of residential single one-family homes. We've had a lot of apartments and townhomes approved in our city the last number of years, and so to have the potential for some more single-family homes, I think, is a positive thing. As far as just an update on what's transpired since we met back on March 30th, we had talked a lot about a dedication of open space and trails and park picnic amenities. That was something the Planning Commission wanted to see, and so that was heavily discussed. And as we know, the applicant has proffered a development agreement and seemed to be open to discussing the dedication of that land. So staff went and talked with the Parks and Recs department to kind of get their temperature on this, the possibility of the city accepting a dedication, and they came back with gave us a bit of a statement and expressed some concerns about the city accepting a dedication. They in their, and I, this is coming from them and not from me. I can't, if there's a question on any of this information, it's, I guess it'd be, we'd want to get with Public Works, but they state that Utah County has the responsibility for maintaining the Provo River Trail and much of the adjacent property, or the property adjacent to this development. They said that they're concerned about dedications because of entanglements with the Provo River Delta project. And they've also noted that some sentiments from the council about trail safety has caused them a bit of concern with the dedication. They felt that dedication might go contrary to some of those safety concerns that had been voiced. So in the meantime, staff had continued to work with the applicant on trying to get a development agreement prepared. Originally, we were going to put, we actually had prepared language that for a dedication, but after we had received comments from the Parks Department, we would encourage the developer, the applicant, to withdraw the dedication language because of the Parks Department's position. And so essentially the development agreement was updated to address, I'll pull that up really quick, to address the desire of having open space and trails, but only for the users of the development, the residents, and then also to still include 3 access points to the trail through the development. And then the last thing that I believe was added was just a kind of a design standard for tan vinyl fencing along the Provo River Trail. So the residences would have to, as their properties backed up to that trail, they'd have to have tan vinyl fencing. So that's what's been proffered by the applicant. So the applicant noted a couple of concerns also with the development agreement that were addressed. Or he noted 2 things, and the 2 things, one was concern that of course the land is the subject land is used for agricultural use, and he just wanted to ensure that land, if it was rezoned, would be able to be continued to be used for agricultural use. Staff's understanding of Chapter 1436 of the City Code, it tells us that once that land is rezoned, that those agricultural uses would become non-conforming, legal non-conforming, and so those agricultural uses can be able to be continued to use until the time the land was redeveloped. The second concern was that they wanted a bit of flexibility with the light industrial, and I'm speaking of the concept plan now. They wanted a little bit of flexibility. We attached a concept plan to the development agreement to add some clarity to what was being considered through the development agreement. They were fine in kind of being shall we say kind of boxed in a little bit on the residential side of things, but we're less willing to on the light industrial side. The light industrial side, they want some flexibility, and I think staff understands wisdom in that. So we changed one of the exhibits to, rather than include that concept plan that you're seeing on the screen, we changed it to just show the residential. Just the residential portion. That way there'd be some flexibility again for light industrial. And then we we also tried to do a little bit of a review in the meantime of the west side development policies. There's 7 policies that were important to the west side development committee that was meeting towards the latter end of the last decade. They came up with a set of policies, and staff went through those policies. And again, 7 main policies. You're looking at things like preservation of agriculture, preserve and create quality preserve and create quality usable open space, encourage sustainable residential development, promote development of commercial amenities and employment opportunities, transportation networks, require proper integration and sequencing of development, and preserve our restrict development in sensitive areas. And so staff went through that. Staff's not going to tell you that this proposal lines up perfectly with those West Side policies. West Side policies promote agricultural preservation is an important thing according to these policies. And this proposal would take 55 acres of land out of agricultural production. And so that's something that the city has to consider. But as you consider where this land's at, the land that is marked 3 and 4 is adjacent to the airport, to another, I would say, light industrial use, to Center Street and to a road. We feel like that's a really prime property to be utilized for airport supportive uses. The number 2 portion of land is a piece of land that's the most prone to be impacted by the most prone agricultural land to be impacted by this proposal. It could have impacts on adjacent properties, put development pressure on those adjacent lands and break up more agricultural land. So that's something to consider. All in all, again, I think staff realizes this land really appears to be transitioning. It's even parcel number 2 is very near to the airport. We feel like that airport supportive uses on that property is a good thing. We also note that there seems to be a lot of interest in developing residentially north of Center Street and in this area. We have another rezone we'll be bringing to you here shortly, and then also had contact from the property owner just to the east about the potential for development. So there's a lot of interest in developing this land residentially, and I would note that staff thinks that the addition of one family homes in this area would be a benefit. The neighborhood, probably more importantly than has been very supportive and would like to see more one-family homes in this area, and was very supportive of this proposal. Open space is an important thing that that these West Side policies touch on. We've again, I'd just go back to what we talked about last time. There was a dedication. We had discussions about dedication of some of the open space proposed in the residential development. We have a Parks Department who has some concerns with that. So either way, whether this land is utilized for the public and for the public at large, or just for the residents, I think this has the potential of preserving some good open land, and I think that'd be in harmony with the policy to preserve quality open space. Sustainable residential development patterns. This is one of the important things that kind of sub-policies there was to have a mix of housing types. We're not getting that with this proposal. With that being said, I think that our neighborhood chair in the Fort Utah neighborhood made a really great point last time, how he pointed out that the Southwest future land use map it offers, if we build according to that, that neighborhood's going to have quite a mix of housing types. You'll have multifamily, you'll have one family or single family homes. And so again, I think that as a city at large, I think we need a few more single family lots, and I think that this fulfills a need. And I think if we follow our future land use map, I think we're going to get that mix. Maybe not development by development, but in the neighborhood we're going to have a good mix of housing. Again, I've kind of touched on the idea of employment and commercial opportunities this proposal would bring. Transportation doesn't seem to be a large issue. Sequencing of development, we know that it's we already have had development in this area, so some could argue it's leapfrog, some could argue it's not. There's some land in between it and the next residential development, but we're talking about one 11-acre piece that, again, we've had this recent discussion on the possibility of developing that land. So, and then finally, environmental concerns on this property. All this area in the west side of Provo City's in a high water table. As far as wetlands, I do not, I looked at the map that the city has. I didn't see any wetlands except near the river, and 100-year floodplain. If there's any of that, it would be it would appear to be in the open space area of the proposed residential conceptual development. So that's just an update of information for you since we last met, and I'm here to answer any questions you have. I also want to note that I have the developer here with me and the property owner, Mr. Halliday, so they're both in the room with me.
Councilor Ellsworth, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. It was said in that presentation that there's been a lot of multifamily that's been developed in the city recently. Has there been any multifamily developed within a mile of this property?
No. Again, I guess I'd qualify my comments and say that we've had a lot of approvals. There's a lot going down on South State. A lot of we've seen a lot of development in this, or proposals, approved proposals, and development in other parts of the city, but not in this area.
Do you think that the?
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I was just also going to point out that we did have a rezone of property to the MDR zone up the road closer to the freeway. That would be the closest land that was recently rezoned for multifamily development.
Over on Geneva Road,
Yes.
Where the grocery store was going to be.
Correct.
Okay, would that diversify the housing stock of this neighborhood, or are we relying on multifamily on the southernmost part of Lakeview Parkway and multifamily on South State Street to diversify this neighborhood?
Also multifamily to the east of the Smiths.
There's also multifamily development to the east, or there's multifamily zoning to the east of the Smiths property.
Okay. Yeah, I just don't know that that's really going to contribute to a diverse mix of housing types in this area. It looks like we're consolidating all multifamily to the southernmost parts of the city. All currently approved or soon to be approved development will be in the south side of the city. Even this, you have the layout of the road system to the immediate east of this project. I just don't see this being implemented in the ways that I had hoped it would be implemented. And I don't know why we're comparing apples to oranges when the multifamily was approved on the opposite side of town.
Well, again, the Southwest area plan has a number of areas as we look at that. I don't have that to pull up for you, but the Southwest area plan designates an area for medium density residential and low density residential. This proposal is in harmony with that plan. There was a process that the city went forward with, and this proposal is what is in line with that land use map, or general neighborhood map. Sorry.
Councilor Hardy.
Thank you, Chair. One point of clarification and then my question. You talked about some recently rezoned properties. I think there was one perhaps due south of here that we rezoned recently. Do you remember if that was MDR or LDR?
Trying to remember. We did more so on Lakeview. I think Lakeview Parkway, closer to the freeway, there was we've been talking about some LDR zoning there, but I don't recall anything close to here that was LDR or MDR. Remote. I mean, of course, we've had the MDR rezoning up closer to Geneva Road, but yeah, I'm not remembering one that was.
Yeah, sorry. When I said directly south, I meant like it's not. It was. I thought it was fairly straight south, but not directly next to it. So I am talking on Lakeview Parkway, kind of in the corner there. But anyway, I just my question, I guess, was I think that was for townhome type, which is a different housing type, but it's also single family. But my question is, you've talked a little bit about the development agreement. I think we've kind of had reports on before about what we thought was going to be included, what the developer had indicated he was willing to include, and it's been updated. Actually, let me pause and just say I really appreciated your report that you sent to us several days back. That was very helpful, and I think you did a lot of the summary here. I really appreciated that analysis. I was curious, can we take a look at what the current status of the development agreement is, or can you help me understand what is and what is not in the current development agreement? And perhaps specifically,
Ryan? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, specifically regarding the open space that is being considered next to the Provo River.
Yeah, we can pull that. Brian, do you have that to pull up?
Yes, I don't know if I can share my screen or not.
I guess I would just note that after we had got feedback from the Parks and Recs department, we suggested to the applicant that they consider withdrawing reference to those dedications, and then await direction from the council on this issue.
So, in fact, I don't have a copy to show on the screen, so I don't have a copy that doesn't have internal comments in it. But the current draft agrees that plat can't be recorded unless there are sufficient services for the development, that the developer will improve a picnic area with open space and improve an existing dirt trail into a 10-foot wide asphalt trail in the open space adjacent to the river, and shall provide a minimum of 3 trail accesses that will be located and identified on the plat, and imposes some conditions on the type of fencing adjacent to the trail. That's it.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions before we hear from the neighborhood chair and the public on this? Mr. Hardy?
Thank you. Just another clarification on that. So the 3 access points, was that saying that those 3 access points will be decided later and put on the plat, or are these 3 access points based on the concept plan that's before us? Is there a commitment to where those are going to be, or is it just to be determined in the future?
At this point, it's to be determined.
Thank you. And is there any, at least the way that it's shown here, the land won't be dedicated to the city. Is there an idea on, will it be restricted from the general public, or is it, how is it expected to be operated in the future?
Would you like to hear from the applicant on that?
That would be very helpful, yes.
Mayor and council members, thank you. This is Dave Morton. Thank you for your time. So currently right now, I think that the thought process would be is that it would be obviously an amenity to the project, but we would not limit access to the rest of the public. That is, we actually see the trail continuing on to the other parcels to the east. And so we would encourage, we are in discussions also with some of those others so that we would continue that trail system through the rest of the developments. So that would be the goal.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you. If there's no further questions for Brandon or the applicant, then we will move on to hear from the neighborhood chair. Let's see.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you, everyone. It's good to be here again. I just wanted to, I guess, first address a couple questions. Shannon asked how far it was from this development to the MDR zone at Geneva. So I pulled up Google Maps and ran that real quick, and it's 1.25 miles. So just over a mile from there. There also are already apartments and townhomes between that place and this place. Which brings me, I guess, to one of my major points that I want to really emphasize here. And that is that while I understand that diverse housing types are really important for the city, I don't know if every housing type fits in every area. Just to give an example, right along where we have the bus rapid transit downtown, I think we would all scratch our heads if someone wanted to put in half-acre residential agriculture, right? That doesn't make sense in that area. And so in that area, you're going to see an overrepresentation of high density areas. And in other parts, especially towards the edges of the city, I think you should expect to see lower density developments. I've sent you guys the mathematical modeling before. It's a very basic mathematical modeling. That is actually the best way to minimize average miles traveled, reducing congestion, reducing pollution, those kinds of things. It also creates different feels in different parts of the city. Most people I know that live on the west side live out here specifically because it is less dense and a slower pace than most of Provo. And so I think it's important to have a diversity, not only in housing types within a neighborhood, but also a diversity of neighborhoods from one part of the city to the other. And out here, I think is particularly good for the lower density because it is 3 miles from downtown. We're talking the very edge of town. It is down Center Street, which is a 2-lane road with houses on both sides. Due to planning decisions in the past, there's driveways on that road, and that road is actually nearing capacity. And so if we were to bring higher density out here, we would end up overloading Center Street with traffic and therefore have to have a very expensive infrastructure project to expand that road. So this is one of those cases where actually higher density would cost the city more than lower density does. And so I think that's important to consider when we consider this development and the other two coming up soon that are right in this area. And again, we do want diversity on the west side. We have areas you guys have talked about down on Lakeview Parkway. We've talked about the MDR zone. We will have this within, a mile and a half kind of range. It just won't be every development. And I think that creates a nice, unique thing out here. The other point I wanted to comment on is the trail. We're very appreciative as a neighborhood to the developer for agreeing to increase kind of the setback of the houses from the river to preserve that natural fill there and have a trail along there for access. In fact, as neighborhood chair, I would really hope to see that trail continue into the neighboring neighborhoods and go underneath the Lakeview Parkway overpass that's being built on the river right now, because then it can connect into the new park that's being built as part of the Delta project. And that would create a great walkable community where people can go without walking down major streets and access a local park. And so I hope the city considers that in the future as future developments come in, that this doesn't become just an isolated trail, but connects throughout the neighborhood and to the local parks. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have for the neighborhood.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Hill. We'll now open this up for public comment. We have anyone wanting to make a public comment?
There are no hands up in the participant list.
Okay. Seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring this back to the council for discussion. And just a reminder, this is the second hearing on this item. Mr. Hanley.
I just posted a comment in the chat. Is there any way we could get access to the Southwest area plan map?
I have it open. I just sent a link to John Magnus to that since I assume he's controlling the slides and video presentation there.
Go to John Magnus or John Butterson. Oh, I thought it said John Butterson.
Because it's in the chat, if you wanted to open it up individually, you'd also be able to do that.
So he's got it.
Okay, there we go.
So can somebody help me identify, sorry, I'm trying to navigate this with my iPad here. Can somebody help me identify where we're talking about?
George, it's in the upper left-hand side, roughly where the parkway goes north beyond Center Street. So it's where that yellow area is, northwest side of it.
Okay.
There's a big bend in the river.
So that where it says res, is that understood? Was that plan designating that as single family, or was that just open-ended?
Single family, 4 units to the net acre.
Mr. Harding.
If I can maybe share a little bit, Councilor Ellsworth and I believe both were on the West Side Development Policy Committee. I don't remember exactly what it was called. And we developed the proposals that Mr. Larson's memo reviewed, and I do want to comment that was actually officially adopted unanimously by the council. So it's not just a recommendation, but had been adopted, but not put in to the general plan because it was supposed to go into the Southwest area master plan. And this land use map is kind of the next step, and it will be a component of that. And I would say, to answer that, there are definitely areas that are marked as MDR and others marked as LDR. And so that definitely gives the impression that the res would be lower density than that. You obviously have the RA, which would be even more agricultural in nature than the res. But I would say in part because of the policies that included a mixture of housing types. And if you read in there, it's quite nuanced about trying to keep a single family feel, but still having a diversity of housing types without boundaries, without hard boundaries. So we specifically didn't want, this area is all townhomes, and this area is all single family, and this area is all apartments, and they're have walls around them, and they're separate developments or whatever. The idea, though it was broad, was for a mixture of housing types. So when I look at this res, at least my intention when I recommended, and then later when I approved the recommendations, was that within this residential, it would be predominantly single family detached. It would have that nature of the neighborhood, but I think when done right, you can mix in some twin homes, some triplexes, some mansion homes, which Mr. Pepperoni introduced me to that concept, and it's a really awesome concept. I think those things can be woven in, 5%, 10%, and still have the same neighborhood feel, but give a variety of some depth to our housing stock, so people of different stages in life can live next to each other and can accommodate that life cycle. So I would say that these res sections, these kind of light green sections, yellow green sections, are not explicitly single family detached, but are designed to be that low density residential, but hopefully with a little bit more texture.
Is there any, Councillor Hanley?
Well, thank you. That's very helpful, Mr. Harding, and it's helpful to see that map again. I was kind of on the tail end of that process on the council, and just wasn't remembering where everything was located. I think it's a very complicated question, because I do think, we need all housing types in Provo, including single family. The demand is very high, and that's causing part of our crisis with rising prices. But at the same time, we're desperately needing diversity of housing types. And this is also a location that's at somewhat of a remove from transportation hubs and downtown, center of town, as Mr. Hill was mentioning. At the same time, it's close to business. Presumably, this could be an attractive place for people who work at the airport to live. So maybe there's some argument to be made for some higher density here. The cost of the infrastructure and the roads and so on for all of what we're doing on the west side is extraordinarily high, and is not a sustainable cost, because of the over the course of the lifetime of the streets and the neighborhood, the maintenance costs far outweigh the initial costs. So when we do decide to build out here in the west, we do so, frankly, at some financial disadvantage to us, unless, so I think I'm in favor of something that has single family homes in that area, but I think I would agree that I would prefer to see something that's a little more nuanced, a little more mixed, so that it's not sort of an exclusively the same type of housing in a relatively significant high area, a high acreage area. So I don't know if there's flexibility there, but it seems to me that it warrants a little more diversity of type, and maybe that ends up kind of meeting multiple needs at once. Anyway, those are just some of my reactions. I've been torn about this project since the beginning, and I can't quite resolve those feelings. But those are sort of the parameters of where I sit and how I see this.
Councillor Ellsworth.
Yeah, I appreciate the nuance that Mr. Harding and Mr. Handley presented. Per this site, I think we could have an opportunity here to create workforce housing. I was at a shop recently, and I ran into someone who works in Duncan Aviation, and they said over the last year, hundreds of employees have been hired at Duncan Aviation. And last year when I visited Duncan Aviation, I asked the general manager, I said, where do your employees live? Can they afford to live in Provo? And he said, no, they got to live further south, further down south. And it's just, I think we're missing, for me, I feel like these conversations are really inconsistent. And that's not any one person's fault. I just feel like the development conversations are really inconsistent. They lack data, and sometimes I think they lack objective standards. In some situations, we're saying that we need affordable housing. Just earlier in the work meeting, I think Mr. Harding referenced the need for affordable housing, something we want to wrap our arms around. It's probably the worst time to buy housing in my lifetime. I don't know, maybe in the last 60, 70 years. And so in some situations, in some conversations, for some projects, we're saying, yes, we need density. Yes, we need affordable housing. And then we totally change direction. And in a different situation, we say, we don't need any more affordable housing. We don't need any density. We don't want it. This is the wrong place for it. There's no amenities here. There's no transit. And then we go back to another conversation where there's a different development on the other side of town where there also is no amenities and no transit, and we're building density there. So the lack of consistency is the only thing that is consistent. And it's really frustrating because I feel like I'm jerking around these developers and they don't deserve that. So yeah, I don't think that this is a sustainable development. I don't think that it adds diverse housing types. I don't think it creates workforce housing. I don't think it contributes to affordable housing. I'm not sure that that parcel we rezoned to MDR will be developed as MDR. It could be commercial development. It could be rezoned another way. So I'm just really stricken with the fact that we are constantly being inconsistent and that this is not consistent with conversations that we had 2 months ago or 4 months ago or 5 months ago.
The neighborhood chair has a follow-on comment he'd like to make, which we'll allow at this time, and then we'll bring it back to council again.
Thank you so much, Dave. I just wanted to comment a little bit on this map. Now, Dave Harding talked about being on the committee that made the policies that were read off earlier. I was not on that committee. I was not neighborhood chair yet, but I was on the committee that made this map. And, you know, I think the most interesting part here is what it took to get neighborhood and subsequently city council approval of this. Now, I'm sorry if Dave Harding had one view in his mind, but very much when we presented this to the neighbors, they were very, very concerned about the city sticking to the idea of 4 units per acre, low density housing kind of thing. Now, the 4 units per acre, I think, is a key number that you must remember, because that was actually given to us by Public Works due to the need for a lift station and the capacity that was expected for that lift station due to the road infrastructure and the limited connections through the freeway. And so they told us we need it to average that out here because there are unique circumstances here with the infrastructure and the cost it would take to bring it up for a higher density. And, you know, affordable housing is an interesting thing. You look, and most of the things driving up housing right now is not, you know, a lack of apartments, to be honest. There's a lot. And I just would like to point out that nobody talked about including single family homes with the large developments coming in downtown by the Frontrunner station. That was not part of it. And so kind of following on Shannon's ideas of inconsistent conversations, nobody's taking these apartment complexes and saying, well, why don't you include single family homes? And yet every time there's a single family home, we have to include apartments and townhomes, even if it doesn't seem to fit. Now, I lived in New York City. I know what it's like to live in an apartment. And I'm sorry, you don't want to live in an apartment when you're 3 miles from downtown. You're too far from grocery, you're too far from public transportation, all those things. And that is very consistently true. You want to live downtown where restaurants are next door, the grocery store is down the street, and public transportation stops in front of your apartment building. That's what you want with those. And so putting it out here just creates a poor quality of life for everybody involved. It devalues the single family homes. It devalues the apartments because they don't have the needed amenities and kind of lifestyle that's around there. I will tell you that if there is a movement to change what this map represents and include more high density homes, you will have a lot of pushback from the residents out here. They will not like it very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. I see we have some requests for second comments here. Let's see if we have first comments from Mr. Fillmore, Hoban, and Shipley first before we go to the second round. Mr. Hoban.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I definitely appreciate all of my council members, fellow council members sharing their thoughts. And I can totally appreciate the concerns about, you know, is it the right development? Is it matching with the plan? I guess my question would be, so we definitely have a housing situation shortage in Provo. So is it better to, I don't know how to say this. Look, we have a developer who wants to build a development, build homes, invest. Is it better to approve housing that maybe isn't exactly what some of us are looking for? Or continue to hold off until, we find a developer who can build something that everybody agrees on, including the neighborhood and such. I'm sincerely asking, and maybe this is a conversation more of like a theoretical conversation offline. I don't know, but I guess maybe for the council members who have some concerns, who have some deep concerns about it, is it better just to get some housing going so people can get in homes, or is it better to hold off and kind of wait for that perfect development? I'm sincerely asking that.
Thank you. Mr. Shipley or Mr. Fillmore, would you like to go next?
I'll be happy to speak up. It seems like we have these circular discussions too frequently. We have a single family home development and people say, where's the multifamily? Where's the high density? And we have a high density proposal and people say, where's the single family homes? And, some of these proposals, some of these areas simply don't lend themselves to what someone might want by way of an ideal demographic mix. Personally, I'm very persuaded by the neighborhood chair. I think he makes some very relevant points. He speaks for his neighborhood, and I appreciate the way he articulated some of the history here. The neighborhood and the developers seem to have worked hard to come up with a proposal that satisfied most people in that area. And we ought to take into account what the people in that area are most concerned about, most interested in. So despite some legitimate issues being raised, I'm inclined to support the developer and the neighborhood chair and the people he represents at this point.
Mr. Shipley.
Yeah, just maybe a quick comment. So first of all, I think, if we're communicating to developers that we don't have the infrastructure to do any more density than this, and a developer's interested in maximizing profitability, and they'll go as dense as a city in most cases will allow them to go to maximize profitability. If we have somebody coming to us with this kind of plan, because that's the communication that the city has given to them, that fits the neighborhood plan, that fits what the neighborhood wants, and then noting that there will be diversity of housing types, based on, what we're looking at here, this map, I would be supportive of this. I don't think it precludes us from having diverse housing types. I don't think each and every developer needs to, within their development, have every single type of housing or a lot of diversity. I would just hope, and I think the point of us looking at each one of these and seeing a map like this is to make sure that we don't just have one housing type, in an entire region. But within the same development, I think it's a lot to ask of every single developer that's going to want to develop in Provo to say, hey, we need you to, have a lot of different housing types or a mixture of housing types in each and every one of your projects. And I think most developers, honestly, if we'd communicated that the infrastructure was in place out here for more dense housing, I'd put money on the fact that they would probably have come with more dense housing in areas of this project, because that could be more profitable for them. So I think where we're at with this project now at this point, having communicated that infrastructure doesn't support more, diversity within this project, the fact that the land use map, seems to be consistent with what what is being proposed here. I'm supportive. I think we do need to Shannon's point, have a consistent, and maybe that's something that we need to spend more time as a council on, something that we can consistently talk about as far as these maps and areas of town that need more diverse housing. But I think we're late in the game with this particular developer to go back to them and say, just kidding, you got to wait for better infrastructure. And just kidding. We'd love you to, have more density here and make more profitability on something that we communicated before was not the case. So I just worry about our messaging at this point. I do think it's a fit for the area of the city, and I'd be supportive of a project like this.
Thank you. I'll make my first comment as well, and then we'll go back for the second round. I pretty much echo what Mr. Shipley and Mr. Fillmore have said. And then my answer to Councillor Hoban's question would be, at least in this case, when the developer puts in this much expense and effort, it meets the neighborhood plan, has very high support for the neighborhood, from the neighborhood. Even if it's not perfect, I would say let's get it going. I also wanted to comment on the industrial portion. That actually had some appeal to me as well. Seemed like a good fit near the airport. And I resisted asking some questions about the flex space, which is a personal interest to me because I've spent 9 months looking for a certain type of flex space in this area, and it's really in short supply. So I think that would be a plus as well. So now let's go back for second comments. Looks like Councillor Ellsworth's first up for the second round.
Yeah, I just had some concerns about maybe some misrepresentation of the facts. We certainly can put density 3 miles from downtown. I live in a townhome 3 miles from downtown. There are no amenities in my area. There's no transit. There's no grocery store. There's not a place to get your oil changed. There's really no commercial development nearby, and yet housing values here are soaring. So to say that we can't put this, we couldn't even put low density in this area because it wouldn't make it or wouldn't do well or citizens wouldn't be happy or it's unlivable or it's unsustainable. I don't think that's true. And it's inconsistent with previous decisions that the council has made. It's inconsistent with other plans that the council has. So these inconsistencies are personally driving me crazy. And then when we come to a different part of town and say, no, we can't put single family residential there because we have an affordability crisis. Shannon, we have to put 200 apartments 3 miles from downtown. And then the whole council, not the whole council, but most of the council votes for it. It's just really confusing. So it's not just inconsistent, it's also arbitrary. So I hope that we really take the time to do a deep dive on this, because we're going to keep going along saying, oh, the developers is far along, let's just do it. Oh, it's not great, but it's good enough. The developers is far along, let's just do it. And we've been doing that over and over and over as long as I've been on the council. Oh, the developers is far along, let's just do it. It's completely inconsistent, it's arbitrary, and we're just going to keep going along with this pattern, and I don't think that it's sustainable. Yeah, and another point I need to make is that there's two major reasons that housing affordability is so terrible right now. One is interest rates are at an almost all-time low, so people can get into houses a lot easier. And two, there is almost no housing stock that's available. So those 2 points are the reason that housing is so difficult to obtain right now. Creating more housing stock is part of the solution. And again, I think that we need to be more conscientious, more data-driven, and more consistent.
Councillor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. I did want to just kind of respond to some of the things that have been said. I appreciate the perspective brought by the neighborhood chair. Trying to blank on his last name, Mr. Hill. I appreciate what he, that he took part of this, took part of the process with the development of this map. And I was, again, part of part of the group that developed the principles upon which this was based. Was part of the group that part of the council that approved those policies. And I was not part of the group that developed this map, but I was part of the council that approved of this map. And it is shown as RES, and I guess we can try to figure out what what that means, and maybe that means different things to different people. But when I approved this map, it was with full understanding of what the principles were upon which this was supposed to be developed, including the requirements or the policy of a mixture of housing types. And so I guess so that was my understanding when I approved it as part of the council that approved it. But with that said, I should say that I still think I still believe that the policy that this area should be developed at 4 units to the acre. I still support that. And if Chair Hill thinks that when I talk about a mixture of housing types, that I'm talking about high density, that I'm talking about apartments, I apparently did not describe my vision very well with that. I think there are examples, plenty of bad examples, but there are some good examples around the country of where you can have a mixture of housing types that don't disturb the nature of these neighborhoods, and it can be done very, very well, and that's what I would like to see. So perhaps our vision isn't quite as different as perhaps he thinks it is. A couple other thoughts. Just the general question: is it better to wait or is it better to move forward? I think that is a very good question to be asking, because I think sometimes the answer is yes and sometimes the answer is no. But some of these these developments will be around for 50, 80 years, and so it's sometimes hard to do a do-over. Now there's times where you need some development to spur other development and move forward, but I don't think that really applies in this case, because I think the demand for development is so strong that I don't think we should be afraid of standing, that's not the right term, of expecting or requiring high quality developments, and being willing to say no when we don't have high quality developments. And I'm talking very generally, not specifically, because I agree with Councillor Ellsworth on a lot of things, not everything that she shared, but on some of the things that she shared. And I agree that I'm getting a little frustrated where I feel like we're constantly saying, or at least I'm constantly saying, well, I don't like this, or I really want to see something else, but it's so far along, we'll move along, because I do feel like these policies have been in place for quite some time, and I would love to see the zoning that would be necessary to implement these policies be created, because we're not even there yet. I don't hold it against the developers at all, because the zones that we would need in order to implement these policies don't even exist yet. And which, let me put in a plug again for the bandwidth of planning, because I think that's another area where we've talked about something that we would like to see, and they haven't been able to create that yet. But even with that frustration, I think with the timing of how long this development has been in the works and whatnot, I am willing to move forward with this proposal. But we've heard that people are now talking about the development just to the east and another development in the area. I'm very close to the point where I'm going to say that without these other tools in our toolbox, I'm no longer willing to approve things that I think go against some of these council approved policies. But in this case, I am willing to move forward with this one. There were a couple councilors have talked about this being aligned with the neighborhood plan. I want to point out that there is no neighborhood plan, or there's no, I should say, area master plan for this area. We have a future land use map, but the map is only one component of the plan. And I think that might be another time to plug for the ability, the bandwidth of planning to accomplish these tasks. And the final thing that I wanted to mention, I would like to talk about the open space on the banks and what that looks like, but I guess I'll hold that for a third round.
Councillor Hanley.
Yeah, I just want to say a couple of quick things. I'll try to be quick. Just want to echo what Mr. Harding was just saying. I really think it's important that we acknowledge that there's a nuance here of creating a little more diversity of housing types without it being, something high density. So that's not what I was proposing at all. I was just looking for a little more variety and of type. And I think if it takes more creative zoning application on our part as a council, that's on us to create it. I don't think it's time for us to demand that in midstream. And I don't think, just in disagreement with what Ms. Ellsworth was saying, I really don't think I don't necessarily like all the decisions we make, but I don't think it's fair to characterize them as arbitrary and inconsistent. We're following here the best lights of a plan that was developed with a lot of citizen and council input a number of years ago. And we might not like that. And as we may not like some of the plans that were developed for the Southwest, for the Southeast, but I didn't see any arbitrary or inconsistency, and arbitrariness or inconsistency. I maybe saw sort of wishing that we had some better plans in place rather than the ones that we had. So I think that's got to be noted. I do think we're maybe sometimes frustrated with previous plans, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're being arbitrary. And I do think that it's a little, I'm just struggling to understand the argument that 3 miles from downtown in the Southeast is a bad thing, which I think we all agreed on, and that now it seems anyway. I don't want to sound too argumentative, Ms. Ellsworth, but there's a contradiction in what I heard you saying, that you don't like that this wouldn't that you want this to have higher density, even though it is 3 miles from downtown, when the example you gave was an example of why it wouldn't be a good idea. So that seems like a confusion for me. I guess I am willing to support this, although I would like us to be more aggressive about rethinking more creatively our zoning and our planning, so that we are not, as we're saying, always caught sort of too late in the process to make some adjustments, because I think this plan has some merit to it, but I wish the residential area had more diversity, just more diversity, not necessarily much higher density, but that diversity would involve some diversity.
Thank you. We're still on second comments here. We've had 3 so far. So I'd like to hear from Councilors Fillmore, Shipley, and Hoban. If you have another comment, you can waive that if you want to, but let's go.
I would just quickly state that I agree with what Mr. Hanley just said and appreciate his comments.
Thank you. Mr. Fillmore?
Same here. I'm not opposed to a higher density development on West Center Street, as long as our infrastructure supports it and it gets all the usual approvals. One of my primary focuses, as Ms. Ellsworth knows, is to do everything we can to improve and enhance South State Street, both by incentivizing new retail and also some beautification efforts. I'd like to see that happen, and the sooner the better. But as far as this project goes, I think it stands on its own merits.
Mr. Hoban?
No, thank you. Nothing smarter to add than what everyone else has said.
Okay. I'll waive my second comment as well, but I just from a rule standpoint, I want to point out something interesting. Our actual council rules say that each counselor gets 2 opportunities to comment. So in an ideal scenario, we would each get a couple of turns, and then we would proceed to vote. Of course, we're pretty loose about that, but happy to go back, but let's try to wrap it up as soon as we can. So we're on third comment now for Councilor Ellsworth.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Mr. Handley. My point to clarify is not that multifamily or density is bad anywhere in the city. My point is that it's inconsistent to say it's bad in one part of the city, but it's not, or it's bad in 3 miles in this direction from downtown, but it's okay in a different direction 3 miles from downtown. So that's what I'm saying, is it's inconsistent application. And I think it was the chair who said there aren't amenities, aren't facilities here. Therefore, it would not work, which density wouldn't work, but density would work because it does work in places where there aren't amenities. Do I think there should be amenities there? Yeah, I do. I think people deserve this quality of life. That was my point to clarify, is that there is inconsistency in saying that 3 miles west of downtown is a bad place for density, but 3 miles south of downtown is a good place for density. And I still think it's inconsistent because we just aren't applying the same rubric to developments, even in the same areas. We're not really using data. Yeah, it's consistently frustrating to me.
Thank you. And again, I'll just mention we'd like to try to get to a vote here as soon as we can, but we do have a third comment now from Councilor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to also note that in our rules where it talks about two statements by councilors, it also talks about allowing for clarifying questions and rebuttals of what others have commented.
Sure.
I would like to discuss a bit the open space and the dedication question. I heartily agree with the neighborhood chair, Mr. Hill, about the value of having this pathway here. And I too would like to thank the developer. I think I appreciate his willingness, and I think we've kind of, I don't want to call it runaround, but it sounds like he's been very willing to accommodate the city. And the problem is as elected officials, we're not certain, or we're not unified in exactly what we want here. And so I think we ask for a dedication. He says, all right, I'll give you a dedication. And now, the conversation has gone away from a dedication. So I appreciate his patience, and I appreciate his willingness to work with us. I do think that that pathway is very valuable. We've talked about this recently, kind of one of our perhaps BHAGs, or our BHAG could be, or one of the big things we wanted to focus on was using the Provo River as an amenity. And too many times in the past, we've developed kind of with our backs to the river, trying to almost hide it or avoid it, where we've talked about trying to embrace it. And I read through the email that was given by Parks and Rec, and I really appreciated their description of the issues. I had some questions, and I emailed out those questions to Mr. Robbins earlier, with just because I feel like I understand some of what he's saying here, but I wasn't quite sure how it applied specifically to this plot of land. And I don't think I would vote for a dedication or request the developer, do that dedication over the objections of Parks and Rec. But I guess the reasoning behind why they said that they don't support a dedication, I struggle to see how it applied to this plot. I appreciate the developer saying that they're still going to develop it, and that they would kind of foresee it being used or open, to the broader public, and coordinating with the other developments in the area. And I really appreciate that. Sometimes, though, those plans change later on, and even after it's handed off to the HOA. So I do have some concern there. Also, if we share Mr. Hill's desire for a trail to lead all the way up to the new park, I feel like perhaps we need to do something more to make sure that that's gonna happen. And I do think that having this kind of trail is very important for the walkability of these neighborhoods that may not have some of the walkability amenities of other parts of the city. So I do think this is very important. So I would like to explore still the idea of a dedication, and try to understand what the objections are, Parks and Rec. So to me, that's a discussion worth having before we move forward with a vote.
Thank you. Are there any other third comments? All right, seeing none, then Mr. Jones, what is the status of the implied motion at this point? Does it
Sure.
include the development agreement?
No, the implied motion is, sorry, I'm trying to open up my switch windows here so I can see it. There's been no direction from the council that there should be, or no concrete guidance that there should be a development agreement. Oh wait, is this the one? I'm trying to remember, was there a motion in the last meeting about this one? This is the second hearing, right?
Yes, it's the second hearing.
Should I say that? Or
I'm trying to remember if I'm getting this one confused with the different.
Staff's recollection is that, obviously this is our second hearing, but there's been no motion made.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And then I think I started to get it confused with another one, with the other one that we're looking at the development agreement. So the implied motion should be simply to approve the rezone as applied for. But we do have an alternate version of the ordinance to approve a development agreement in the system. So it would require a motion to substitute that ordinance version for the other, that exhibit for the other.
Okay, and could you or Mr. Larson remind us of what the developer is proffering, or if he is proffered? I believe there was a proffer, but.
So the proffer, as I understand it, is to agree that the plat cannot be recorded unless there are sufficient services, is that the word we use, adequate services in place at the time of development, and that in the open space adjacent to the Provo River, they will improve the picnic area with open space, within the open space, and improve an existing dirt trail to a 10-foot wide asphalt trail, provide a minimum of 3 trail accesses that will be located and identified on the plat, to be identified at a later time as we discussed earlier in the meeting. And that the fencing adjacent to the trail should be tan vinyl fencing. And obviously otherwise that they would abide by the concept plan and the requirements of the zone.
Okay.
And I guess we should, Brandon, I got sent that from you, but I suppose we ought to have the developer confirm that that is in fact their voluntary proffer.
This is Dave Morton. That is correct. That is our voluntary proffer. Sorry, Dave. No, it's okay.
So do we have any counselors that would like to make a motion to amend the implied motion to include that proffered development agreement?
Mr. Chairman, I guess I'm waiting for Dave Harding to make that motion, but my only concern at this point is I don't want to miss an opportunity with respect to that dedication. If I'm not entirely clear on the reasons for the city to decline that, I wouldn't be opposed to wait till our next meeting to get some clarification on reasons for not doing it, or maybe a way to do it, and where it might be part of a larger extended trail at some point in time. David, is that what you were after?
Mr. Harding?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I appreciate you speaking up. I do feel like the developer has an interest in having this resolved tonight, and I feel like the developer signaled his willingness to kind of accommodate the city however we wanted to move forward. I am sensitive to the amount of time we've taken on this and for the items we still have left tonight. So I think I will move that we change the the implied motion to include the proffered development agreement, and then just ask that Parks and Rec continue the conversation as the development agreement, I believe, usually still needs to be negotiated. Well, maybe not in this case, but often the development agreement can be negotiated afterwards. And so I would hate to shut the door on a dedication if the parties can come to an agreement on that. But I don't think the development agreement necessarily precludes a dedication in the future. So I think I would like to vote on the currently proffered development agreement tonight, and then see where the discussion goes beyond, because perhaps I just misunderstand, or perhaps Parks and Rec, may want to take a second look at this as well. And if they do that in the future, I'd hope they have that opportunity.
Okay, we have a motion to amend the implied motion to include the development agreement. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Second, Mr. Fillmore. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Mr. Harding?
Yes.
Mr. Hanley?
Yes.
Mr. Hoban?
Yes.
Mr. Fillmore?
Yes.
Councillor Ellsworth?
Yes.
Vice Chair Shipley?
Yes.
And I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes. So that brings us now to a vote on the newly amended implied motion, which would include the proffered development agreement. So is there any further discussion on that? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. Go in reverse order. Vice Chair Shipley?
Yes.
Counselor Ellsworth,
Yes.
Counselor Fillmore,
Yes.
Counselor Hoban,
Yes.
Counselor Hanley,
Yes.
Counselor Harding,
Yes.
and I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes. So the motion carries unanimously. We'll now jump back to item number 3. Apologies for those who were kept waiting. Item number 3 is a resolution supporting the submittal of the 2021 Land and Water Conservation Grant application to secure grant funding to aid providing park improvements for the Provo Regional Sports Park. And this, if any members of the public would like to give a comment for this item, they're encouraged to call in or sign in now. This item is to be presented by Doug Robbins, Parks and Recreation Assistant Director.
Thank you, Chair Sewell and members of the Municipal Council and Mayor Cavusi. Again, thank you for the opportunity to present to you an important strategy in the funding plan for our Provo's Regional Sports Park. This funding plan includes a significant grant contribution from the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Parks and Recreation is currently drafting a grant proposal, and part of this application requires a statement of commitment. This is mostly procedural and must be done through resolution. A little bit of background on the Land and Water Conservation Fund. It's federal revenue that's generated through federal land and resource leases. There are grants appropriated by the U.S. Park Service and locally administered through Utah State Parks. Provo City has had success in years gone by building parks through Land and Water Conservation Fund funding. Some examples include Exchange Park, Riverside Park, the Provo River Trail in between those two parks, the Fort Utah Park, Provost Park, Sertomo Park, and South Fork Park. This grant opportunity requires a 50-50 local match. We'll be asking for the maximum amount of $3 million, and the city's local match would be funded through the Parks and Recreation Capital Improvement Plan. This is a reimbursement grant, so the city would expend the funds and then would be submitting for reimbursement through Land and Water Conservation. The intent of this is to utilize the grant to develop recreational facilities on land that we've recently gone through the conversion process from the former Tim Quantas Park to the Regional Sports Park property. So in order to be considered, grant proposals must be submitted by May 1st. And Parks and Recreation staff requests your support of this important grant opportunity through resolution today, so we can get our application in by May 1st. If you've got any questions that I could answer now, I'd be happy to do so.
Mr. Shipley.
Yeah, just a quick one. The Parks and Rec CIP, $3 million, that's money that's already in CIP. There doesn't need to be any transfer or anything like that. But what was it allocated before this project came along? Was it already allocated or earmarked for this park specifically?
Yes, it was. Our submittal for this year's CIP submittal included that amount for this particular project.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions, so thank you, Mr. Robbins. This item will now be open for public comment.
There's no hands up at the moment.
No hands up at the moment, so we will close public comment and bring this back to the council for any discussion. Seeing no hands raised, I will ask for a vote on the implied motion. Councillor Shipley?
Yes.
Councillor Ellsworth?
Yes.
Councillor Fillmore?
Yes.
Councillor Hoban?
Let's get that money. Yes.
Councillor Hanley?
Yes.
Counselor Hardy.
Yes.
And I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes, making this a unanimous vote. Now move on to item number 4, which is an implied motion on a resolution appropriating $17,000 in the Community and Neighborhood Services Department in the general fund for a new full-time parking position, full-time parking coordinator position. If any members of the public would like to give a comment for this item, they are encouraged to call in or sign in now. And this item is to be presented by David Mortensen, Provo City Budget Officer.
Thank you, Chair Sewell. My comments will be fairly short. This appropriation request would fund this parking coordinator position for the last 2 months of the fiscal year, so May and June. That's what the $17,000 would cover. And then just for your information, the position would be included in the fiscal year 22 budget as part of our budget process. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so thank you, Mr. Mortensen. We'll now open this item for a public hearing. If anyone wishes to comment, please raise your hand. Seeing none, we will close public comment and bring it back to the council for any discussion. Not seeing any hands raised, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. Councilor Harding.
Yes.
Councilor Handley.
Yes.
Councilor Hoban.
Yes.
Councilor Fillmore.
Yes.
Councilor Ellsworth.
Yes.
Vice Chair Shipley.
Yes.
And I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes. All right, that item passes unanimously. We'll jump to item number 6, which is an ordinance enacting Provo City Code, Chapter 9.81, Carterville parking area. If any members of the public would like to give a comment for this item, they're encouraged to call in or sign in now. This item is to be presented by Javin Weaver, City Planner. Are you with us, Javin?
He's just getting on now, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Sorry about that. John, if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. This isn't the, go towards the end of it. John, this must be mixed up on the correct PowerPoint. Just go to the very end, one up. Thank you. Down one. Down one slide, please.
Did you need Javin?
Down one more slide. Okay, thanks. Just a quick correction. This PowerPoint should say Well, let me just catch up on where we were last time. Apologize. Since we met last time,
Chapman, I got the right one.
Okay, thanks. Since we met last time, we ended up meeting with the applicant. Initially, Mary Gale was who I was in contact with, but she has since moved from the neighborhood, and we were in contact with Liv Allen, who was working with Mary on this initially. And so worked with her. I sat down with her with Robert Mills, George Hanley, and Sandy Bushio and discussed this. The only changes that we were proposing, and this slide does not show that, but instead of having the restriction being from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., it would be all days, Saturday or Sunday through Saturday. Everything else on the screen is accurate. 2 permits per dwelling, and with a fee of $100. I did send out notice. One more thing, the applicant would like to proceed with a traditional residential permit program as we have in other areas of the city. I did send out notices to the neighborhood. I did hear back from 2 residents within the neighborhood, both were against the program and didn't see the need for it. Are there any questions for staff?
Councillor Ellsworth.
Have you heard from anyone who does support the program who lives there?
The only one I've heard in support of it is Liv Allen.
Okay. But total, we've only had 3 people giving feedback, 4 people?
3 people. Again, there are 17 residential units within the neighborhood. Notices were sent to the physical address and the mailing address of all properties.
Gotcha.
Mr. Hardy.
So I heard, I may have missed something that you said. So it's changing from Monday to Saturday to 7 days a week. But is there any change to the hours, or is it still 11 p.m. to 6 a.m.?
11 p.m. to 6 a.m. The hours are still as is, and that's what the applicant was requesting. And based on the demand of those times, just to give you an idea, on 1625 North, daytime demand is at 50% roughly. Evening, midnight time, we're at 100% being utilized. With 300 West, daytime is in the 30% range, but evening is in the mid 50s%. Again, closer to north of 1500 to 1625, there were more vehicles parked there on a regular basis than the southern part. Hence the proposed area.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Mr. Hanley?
Mr. Weaver, maybe you could remind us, for the sake of clarity, especially since we did have a caller and we received an email regarding the 72-hour, the idea of enforcing the 72-hour limit more effectively before we go to this. I'm just wondering what you can clarify by way of context, just to remind us all of what has been tried already and what you would say to that particular concern.
Yes, of course. Parking enforcement does mark 72-hour vehicles. Primarily, that's going to be complaint-based. If we don't know, they can't go out and enforce on it. They do their best. They have a whole city to manage for that. But again, primarily complaint-based. They have focused on this area. They have for quite some time and monitored it regarding 72 hours to the best that they can.
I guess my question is, did that yield any results? I mean, I'm assuming since you still believe this is the right thing to do, it didn't change things sufficiently.
The occupancy of vehicles is still there, but they do turn over they aren't so stagnant. They due to the increase of enforcement.
Mr. Weaver, I had a question. You mentioned on this last round of letters, you only had the 3 responses. Earlier, when the program was first proposed, how many residents responded that they were in favor of it?
I looked through a list. It looked like there were about 20 or so, 20, 25. But again, that was for the whole area. And for the whole area that was initially proposed.
Okay. So in between those two, we don't have a real count on the number who have indicated support for the current area?
Correct. I looked through the initial documents that were submitted by Mary Gale to see if I could connect names and addresses, and the ones that I could, the owners have since changed over since then.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Weaver before we move to the public hearing or public comment?
Mr. Chairman, this is Bill. I apologize. My computer's not allowing me to raise my hand for some reason. So I've just got to kind of interject here.
Go ahead.
I'm a bit confused. I don't sense any neighborhood surge of support or approval for this. Is this a city-initiated thing, or do the neighbors really want this as a supermajority concern?
Initially, this was brought to staff's attention by the applicant that formerly lived in the neighborhood. And that's how this came to council. She petitioned it and started going through the process of having a permit enacted for the area. So it was by a resident within this area who brought it to the city's attention.
Okay, so an ex-neighbor raised a concern. He's no longer there. We're going there with a parking program where do I understand, Jevin, we're not quite certain that the majority of the neighbors really want this?
Now, who she worked with also has property in the area, and who George and I spoke with, and is in strong support of this program still.
But I mean, do we have a sense that the majority of the neighbors themselves who live there want this?
I have not heard back from any of the neighbors in support other than the applicant, Liv Allen.
So I must have missed something. So what is our motivation to impose this on a neighborhood that has expressed their strong support for it?
Based on the occupancy of the street being utilized for vehicles being parked there, it does warrant having some type of parking management that could be in place for the street area, if you so desire.
Mr. Harding.
Yeah, Mr. Fillmore talked about missing something, and I think the key part that has been missing here is, the city has a defined process for residents to bring forward these requests. This process was followed, and at the beginning, a larger area was outlined. There was an applicant, and they had, it sounds like, between 20 and 25 signatures of residents in the area that said they wanted a parking permit program. Staff went in and they evaluated, and so that gets us through the first step. Then the next step, staff goes in and evaluates, is it really needed? And they've determined that 2/3 of the proposal doesn't warrant a program, a permit program. And so they shrunk it down to a smaller area. That smaller area has been canvassed with notes saying, hey, this is coming. Give us your feedback. And at that point, the process doesn't require a new petition. It doesn't require people to actively voice it. It's just, it comes back to the council with whatever feedback we get from those flyers. And from those flyers, it sounds like we still have one interested neighbor who has expressed support and 2 that have expressed opposition to it. So it's not really in the process to go out and verify that there's sufficient positive support. It's just everyone has to be notified, and we take their feedback.
Okay, so we're really looking for negative opposition. In other words, we've put them on notice that the city's about to do this, and if you object, please let us know. So we're inferring from their silence that people don't object. Is that right?
And Bill, they would have had ample notice because this was noticed prior to when we heard it at the end of March and then this meeting. So they've had 2 notices mailed to their addresses.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you, Javin.
Mr. Jones.
Councilor Fillmore, I think the other thing that may just appear odd with respect to this is that normally the past history has been that we put these parking permit programs into place because the neighborhood is more or less begging us to do so, but that's not necessarily the only reason for doing it. And I think that probably the disconnect is so far we've pretty much only seen that, but in this particular case, the recommendation is coming from staff instead of from the neighborhood itself.
Okay, but like you say, you just haven't had objections, I take it.
All right, if there's no further questions, we'll open this up for public comment. And it was pointed out to me that the current applicant is in attendance. Invite you to comment if you'd like to, along with any other members of the public who may be interested.
Ms. Allen, you'll want to hit *9 to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I heard the comments from my neighbor earlier today, Bernie, who he lives not directly on my street, but he lives on 300 West, a couple doors down. They don't have such a big problem as much as we do on 1625. Most of the students from Branbury and Alpine Village park on our street. Some trickle into his street. And I understand his situation. He is a quadriplegic. He does have people that take care of him round the clock. He does have multiple people living with him because of that. So I do understand his concern. But I would also tell him, if he was here, I would tell him maybe make them pay for the permits and not himself, because I know that was his concern.
All right, thank you, Ms. Allen. I don't think we have any other attendees in the list, so unless she has anything else to say, I think we will close public comment and bring it back to the council for any further discussion. Councillor Hanley.
Well, it's maybe a question for the rest of the council, because I think when we spoke about this last time, there was some interest in maybe delaying this so that this could be folded into a more comprehensive approach to parking that we were thinking about. And I had expressed some reservations about holding this particular project up on that basis, because this has been around as a problem for quite a while. I think it was certainly the former council that first heard this presentation, probably over, maybe a year and a half or so ago. And so I was feeling some concern about that. And also because that applicant, Mary Gale, had left, and I had not met or talked with Liv, I was interested to know, that there was still interest from at least somebody in the neighborhood who was pushing it, and that there wasn't any significant opposition. And so, in my conversation with Ms. Allen, it was very clear that the issue is still very much alive, even though it's very localized, it's a rather unique problem, I think, with a proximity of a number of apartment complexes and the parking that just spills over onto these streets. So, it wasn't the overwhelming feedback from the neighborhood that maybe would have given us a clearer picture here. But I did want to remind the council that that was the discussion we had just had 3 weeks ago, and that we went and had that meeting with her, and are back presenting this. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was remembering that context. I just don't know if this is such a large, it's a relatively small project. So even though it might fit under the rubric of a broader, newer, comprehensive approach to parking, I'm not sure that it warrants waiting that long to at least try this out to see if it fixes the problem.
Councillor Ellsworth.
I prefer to wait. I prefer to see a recommendation, and I trust Javin, but I'd just like to see this evaluated with maybe a different lens or from a different perspective. It's also concerning to me that this would impact citizens in a really unique way where we're not charging this much anywhere else in the city. So this kind of pilot program might be more successful if we did it under a broader umbrella with our future parking manager. I'm also really uncomfortable telling citizens that they're necessary employees who come to their house every day or who live at their house need to go out and buy $100 permit. That doesn't feel like it's in line with my core values or the values of our community.
Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, Chair, since you're on the committee, the parking committee has been discussing this on and off with members of the community and neighborhood services. And there has been a good dialogue with the applicant. We've heard reports of that. I am comfortable. I think I probably was the one that suggested, maybe we hold off on this until we have kind of a new paradigm with parking management. But with discussions and whatnot, I'm comfortable with moving forward with this now, and then as additional components come online, it could be added to this program. But as far as the caller earlier, and I already forgot his name, but one thing is if he has multiple people kind of rotating through, but only one at a time is parking on the street. One of the features of the non-paper based, the digital permit allows you to apply it to different license plates, and you can rotate that through. And so it's possible that that it wouldn't require 3 or 4 permits to be purchased. And we've also talked about flexibility in implementation of these programs. And so I hope if there's some unique circumstances there that those could be worked out with city staff. And I think that's all I wanted to say.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
If I may make a comment, it's not letting me raise my hand. One thing that Mr. McGuire did bring to staff's attention was in regards to people that do need special care and assistance. And I was looking in various other municipalities that have special care permits. And that's something I would like to bring to the parking committee and discuss internally, and how that's something I feel like we lack within our residential permit programs for people that do need special assistance, and how we can look for permits that could benefit them, that they are not utilizing their visitor passes. So that's something I would like to discuss internally, bring forward at a later time, that could help people that need extra care and assistance, and would still have the availability of using their visitor passes from our current traditional permit programs.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. I'd be in favor of something like that to accommodate these special need cases. Do we have other comments? Well, I guess that means we need to vote then. If we don't have any other comments. I think I'm inclined to echo what Mr. Harding said, which would be my comment on the situation. So anyone else? All right, I'll call for a vote on the implied motion then. Mr. Shipley.
No.
Councillor Ellsworth.
No.
Councillor Fillmore.
I'm sorry, no at this time.
Councillor Hoban.
Yes.
Councillor Hanley.
Yes.
Councillor Harding.
Yes.
And I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes. So that motion carries on a 4-3 vote. Move on to item number 7, which is a resolution approving the program year 2021 annual action plan, second year update to the 2020 to 2024 5-year consolidated plan as amended. If any members of the public would like to give a comment for this item, they're encouraged to call in or sign in now. This item is to be presented by Dan Gonzalez, our CDBG and home administrator.
Good evening. Good evening, Tercel and council members. You can all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right. So this is a second public hearing on this item. The first hearing took place on March 30th and is with the intent of adopting the proposed annual action plan. As most of you may remember, or information for the public as well, Provo City receives funding from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. I can control this. How do I control it? Just, sorry, 1 second. There we go. So Provo City qualifies as a metropolitan city to receive CDBG funding and entitlement of the Community Development Block Grant. Also, Provo City is an entitlement city to receive funds from the Home Investment and Partnerships Program. And for more than 2 decades now, has joined the Utah Valley Home Consortium and acts as the lead entity, the participating jurisdiction for the consortium to receive home funding as well. This year, the allocation for CDBG for use in Provo City is $1,343,750, and to that we add $367,295 in program income, as well as $44,194 in projects that were previously funded and are now finished, did not use all the funding. So that brings the total available for CDBG activities to $1,755,236. For the home program, the allocation from HUD is $1,419,568, and adding program income of $643,384 we come up to a total of $2,062,952. For the last 3 years, we have joined with the City of Orem, the City of Lehigh, and Utah County to collaborate in funding public service agencies. This is for the CDBG program. The statute allows for up to 15% of the current year allocations to be awarded to public service agencies. And in order to facilitate this funding to these different agencies, where in the past, each one of them would have to go to solicit or make application to each of the entitlements, and each one of the entitlements would have to manage that program. This collaborative effort has streamlined that process, where they only have to submit one application, the agencies, and the entitlements. We divide the administrative efforts to minimize the duplication of work. Mountain Association of Governments manages both the City of Lehigh and Utah County CDBG programs. So along with the City of Orem and Provo City, we have been gone into this process. For the current year, we received a number of applications, and combining the total of what's available for public services. And then here I should say that not every entitlement is giving their all of their 15%. They participate with 10% for the collaborative projects and retain 5% for other agencies that may only be applying to them. So the total is 412,266. That's the figure you see there to the left, top left. And underneath that, you see all those that submitted applications. The next column illustrates if they submitted an application and were awarded funding, how much they were awarded for last year. And the next column lets you know how much their application was for funding for this year. So the next three columns have the three entities that are participating in this collaborative effort: Provo, Orem, and Utah County. And right above them is the amount of award from HUD, the allocation that we received. After reviewing the applications, for administrative purposes to ensure that they meet the minimum qualification, then all of these applications are forwarded to a joint committee, to review the applications and also to listen to presentations from the applicants. And then they make recommendations of funding. After that, among the three jurisdictions that receive the CDBG funding, we figure out how to best manage these applications. And so you will see that for the most part, one of the entitlements will receive, will manage one of the applications. In this year, most of them are that way, except for Mountain Lands, which you see there right about here. I hope you can see my cursor there. That's split into the three entitlements in order to utilize all the funding and still arrive to the recommendation the committee's proposed. So as you can see for Provo City, the total amount, the 201,562 reflects that 15% that can be allocated or awarded to public services. I should point out that out of these, the Provo Police Department Victims Assistance was the only agency this year that came specifically to an only Provo committee. The rest of the applications went through the joint committee. So that's where the proposal is to fund these different agencies. One of the updates that I would like to provide to you with the capital projects that solicited funding is with the Commercial Facade Improvement Program. There are some updates to what it has been. This program has been in place for a couple decades at least. And the update were typically, first it was exclusively for downtown, then it was expanded to the 5 downtown planning districts. The proposal this year is to expand it citywide. One of the reasons for doing that is for utilizing the funding in other areas that will be beneficial, but also because it seems that at this time, there's not much interest from businesses located in downtown or any of those 5 downtown planning districts. That's not to say that the program has not been successful there. If you remember from prior years, there have been several businesses that have benefited from the program. And so we're just moving to expand this to other areas of the city.
Mr. Gonzalez, it looks like you have a question from Mr. Harding.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Can we go back one slide? Just wanted to make a quick comment. Just having sat in on some of these presentations in the past, I want to make sure that the council really understands just how grateful these agencies, these charities are about this collaborative approach. Rather than doing 3 different applications, they're able to do just one. And the paperwork, when Mr. Gonzalez talks about a reduction of work, it's mostly a reduction in work for these charities, and they're very appreciative of it. My question, or my what I thought was interesting, and I guess I would like to understand this a little better. With this collaborative approach, it seemed like each entity is kind of pitching in and taking care of a certain part of it. But I noticed that it looks like Provo is doing the 15%, but the other 2 entities are just doing 10%. Does that cause any problems with this collaborative approach if we're pitching in more than the others?
Right. So that's why I mentioned the fact that Provo Police came just to Provo. With the $30,000 that we had, sorry about that. We had we actually, for the collaborative effort, we provided just over 11%. So it's not the full 15%. It's not like Provo is providing more than. It's just in this illustration, because what the council will be approving today is Provo funding. I needed to include Provo Police Victim Services as part of that. So does that clarify the question, or answer the question you had?
Mostly, the one that's I'm still scratching my head about, though, is that $30,000 isn't 4 or 5% of the difference between 10 and 15% is more than 30,000. So is there something else that gets us down to the 11%?
Well, as you may know, most of these agencies are located in Provo. So I don't want to say the majority, but it's a high percentage. It's over 50% that at least 3 or 4 of these agencies, over 50% of the clients that they support are in Provo. In the case of Friends of the Coalition, for example, the Food and Care Coalition, because they are located in Provo, all of the beneficiaries for that program, because they are in Provo, are considered Provo residents. And so I guess I don't know how to explain the fact that even though it seems that we may be pitching in more than the other the other entitlements are, we're looking at the fact that most of these agencies provide a larger number of beneficiaries from Provo City. Now, the reason why the other entitlements only provide 10% is because there are a few agencies that are either somewhere else in the county, not in Provo, or within Orem, and they want the ability to be able to still provide funding for them, for those agencies, and that's the difference. I guess the situation could be looked at the fact that most of the agencies that provide this type of services are in Provo. So I don't know if that helps. Perhaps it would help you understand that the majority of beneficiaries from these other entities or agencies that are in the collaborative effort, again, are mostly Provo residents. So even though it may seem that Provo is providing more funding, it's not that it's not benefiting Provo residents at the appropriate rate.
Okay. Yeah, you said you didn't know if it was helpful. That is helpful. I still don't fully have my head wrapped around it because the money is kind of distributed population wise, and though I agree most of the service agencies are within Provo, they often help people outside of the city and the money, but I think you answered it well enough, and I can reach out to you. I imagine if I still have questions after this.
Okay. All right. So we were talking about the commercial facade improvement. One of the updates to that program is that for new businesses, the benefit is for up to $12,500 when it's a vacant building. In the past, it was $10,000, so it's increased by $2,500. And for existing businesses, is up to $50,000. That's how much funding they could receive. The rest of the requirements remain from previous versions of the program, that the buildings that are assisted must be over 30 years old, that they must create low to moderate income jobs, and this is for every $10,000. So if a business received a $50,000 assistance, that means at least 5 jobs would be created. The CDBG funds used are only for exterior improvements, therefore that's why it's called the Facade Improvement Program. However, we find that many of the businesses that receive this benefit have already done or are in the process of improving the interiors of the building. So it's a match of $3 of CDBG with $1 of their own funds. And again, this may be funds they are using or had recently used within the 12 months from application to beautify the exterior or to do interior improvements. So that is an update to that program. So here is the matrix for the funding. Again, noting at the top in blue the amount that was the allocation from HUD at $1,343,750, adding the $411,489 from both program income and projects that have been completed, and there left a little bit of funding. So we have $1,755,239 to allocate. For CDBG, we by statute are allowed to retain 20% of the entitlement, or the $1.3 million, 20% of that for administration costs. And sorry, I paused here because I was surprised to see zeros there. That's an error on my part. These numbers, the 10,000, 20, and 15,000 should be reflected here. That's what we're recommending for programs that we run within the city. The Community Neighborhood Services Department runs owner-occupied rehabilitation programs, down payment assistance programs for and the commercial facade rehab program. And so we are recommending those $10,000, $20,000, and $15,000. And this is separate from what administration is. This is based on program delivery. This is one-on-one contact with those that are seeking the funding, assisting them to either fill out the applications and through the process of the program itself through completion. Down below, you can see again the 201,562, which is the amount we were talking about before for the public services funding. That's the 15%. And when we look at what we are recommending to be funded, then it leaves a total of $1,239,927. This is right here. Oof. This is right here for other capital projects. And so there's a committee of Provo residents and business owners and some non-profit organization directors that are part of the committee that, again, listen to the applications, they review the applications, and then make the recommendation. As you can see, what is typical is the request for funding is way over the amount that we have available. In this case, we had a little over $2.3 million in requests, when again, all we had for this go around was a little over $1.2 million. So of all the applications, the first one at the top is one that comes from the city's administrator. That's me. You may remember that the 108, there's a Section 108 loan that was requested a few years ago to assist with Duncan improvements at the Provo Airport. The loan was granted from HUD, and the repayment to that is from future CDBG allocations. And so right now we are in the repayment period, and to cover what is required by the schedule to fully repay within the next 10 years, then we need to put aside $250,000 to fulfill that requirement. So that's right off the top. Then within the collaborative efforts for public services, we also look at organizations that are seeking funding to improve their facilities. And this year we had two requests, one from House of Hope and a second one from Ability First. Ability First decided that they were not ready to move on with their project, so they withdrew it. And the project from House of Hope was, what's the word? Switched, I guess it's the correct word, to assist from this current funding to assist with CARES Act funding or CDBG CV funding. Their intent is to replace HVAC equipment, and because of the pandemic, this is one of sometimes very unique type of projects that can be covered. Again, this helps with the cleanliness of the air that is provided to, sorry, I guess I should point out that the HVAC equipment is for the cottages where the clients to their program live, many of them with their children. So anyway, from that on, we have Alpine House requesting $40,000 for capital improvements. They also are requesting to do the roof, to change out some the windows, just to be able to minimize costs. And they requested $40,000. They are given $40,000. That was what was recommended by the committee. The next three projects are the ones that I mentioned that the Committee on Neighborhood Services runs with in-house: the Emergency Home Repair Program, the Commercial Facade Rehab, and the Acres Window Program. You may notice that based on the requests, the amounts that are recommended for funding are lower, but part of the reason for that is because of the funding that is still available for those programs. As you all know, this last year was different than any other year. And while these programs were, still continue to have some movement in the funding because of the pandemic, there was a reduction in how those funds were moving. So in order to be fair to, or have some sort of fairness to everybody that is applying, and still considering that there's sufficient funding to go through projects that are in process, it was decided to provide a minimal funding to those programs. The last one in that category of programs within the Community and Neighborhood Services is the Code Enforcement Officer. They requested $100,000, and the committee is not recommending any funding to that. You may remember from last year, this was a project that it came out of the normal process last year. There was no application submitted with the rest of the applications. There was a request from the department director and the finance director to consider, and again, based on impact from COVID, reduction of revenues and whatnot, it was requested to fund that position of Code Enforcement Officer from CDBG. Again, it was this was not vetted by the committee, but it was proposed to council, and council decided that it was a good use, and so they funded it that way. This year, for two reasons, based on the fact of how much funding was requested for other projects, the committee is not recommending to fund that from CDBG this year. So that position would have to be funded from the general fund if it's to move forward. The next three projects are also city projects. One is for park and recreations. The proposal to create a plaza at 300 South and University Avenue. Recommendation is for 50% of the request, $200,000. And the last application also, the last two applications from Public Works. I guess I had what I see in my screen is very little. So let me go back. For the plaza.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes.
Are we getting close here? We've got a goal to be finished by 9 o'clock, and I'm just wondering if there's a way you can kind of summarize and help us.
I can definitely do that. I was asked to provide more detail, so that's what I was doing. But I can definitely summarize. You can see for yourselves what the recommendations are there. For the home program, the amount is a little over $1.4 million. We are requesting or recommending to keep 10% for administration purposes. And in this case, contrary to what happened with the CDBG, we've had more funding available than the requests. So you can see here, the request for Rural Housing Development Corporation is complemented by the CHODO funding. They are an approved CHODO. So the request is fully funded, as it is the request for the down payment assistance in Provo City. And the remaining funding that is available was the committee recommended to send it over to the loan to own down payment assistance program, which is for the rest of the consortium. And the reason being there is because last year the program ran out of funding in March, and so there was no funding for several months. So that's that. That is the end of my presentation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Are there any questions for Mr. Gonzalez? Seeing none, this is our second required public hearing. So we will open it up to the public for any comments. I don't actually see anyone in attendance on the attendees list. Don't see anyone here in the chambers either. So staff, unless you're aware of somebody, I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the council for any discussion. Not seeing any hands raised, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. Councillor Harding.
Yes.
Councillor Handley.
Yes.
Councillor Hoban.
Yes.
Councillor Fillmore.
Yes.
Councillor Ellsworth.
Yes.
Vice Chair Shipley.
Yes.
And I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes, which means the motion carries unanimously. Councilors, we had discussed a continuation of closed session, but considering the hour and also the advice from Brian Jones that I just confirmed, he feels like we'll be okay to continue in 2 weeks. Would there be any objection if we do that instead of continuing it tonight?
I don't know whether I guess I would just say, I don't know if the mayor or Isaac had thoughts on whether they felt like it was urgent from, it's not from my perspective, but they feel differently.
Mayor or Isaac, do either of you feel like it's urgent for us to consider it tonight?
I'll defer to Isaac because I know he was the one that was engaged in this conversation with Brian. So,
okay.
I have nothing to add beyond what I added before about the timing of it. So, no, nothing to add.
Okay. All right. Well, Mr. Harding.
I was just going to say, I think my preference would be just to knock it out tonight. I don't think we need many more minutes, but yeah. I'm fine with continuing it as well.
Okay. I'm okay either way. Any other councilors have a preference on that? Councilor Ellsworth?
My preference is to do it another day.
Okay, so we have preferences both ways.
I agree with Ms. Ellsworth.
Okay.
I think one of the reasons why we have this deadline is fatigue.
Okay, I can certainly relate to that since I'm usually already retired about this time. All right, so if there's no further objections, then we will adjourn by unanimous consent and take this particular item up in closed session 2 weeks from now. Thank you all for your patience.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.